After his pregnant wife died, strange things started happening in the family. One night after the funeral, his wife's favorite dragonfly specimen was clearly placed on the table, untouched. Suddenly, it fell to the ground in the middle of the night. Her husband, Qiao Jianzhuang, was stunned for a long time. The next night, he couldn't get up. He had just arrived at the hospital for the night shift in the intensive care unit when a comatose boy was suddenly brought in. Of course he passed by him. As usual, something happened. He saw someone and heard his wife's call. The voice came from the missing boy's body. It turned out that his deceased wife's name was Amy. She and her husband Qiao were both doctors in this hospital. They were highly skilled doctors and had a good relationship. They were the envy of everyone in the hospital. Amy was kind-hearted and often provided free medical treatment to poor children. She also organized teams to go to remote and backward areas. The order of free assistance to the local indigenous people in the mountainous area has caused people to have an extremely high evaluation of this kind and beautiful angel. However, things don't always go as planned. Just as Annie traveled thousands of miles to visit the indigenous people, the team was suddenly hit by a severe mountain flood on the way back. The kind-hearted secret Korean team members were left forever in this desolate ancient land by the ruthless mountain flood, and the group completely disappeared after the mountain flood. The poor husband couldn't even find his wife's body, so he could only hold a funeral with his wife's relics and photos. However, after the funeral, things started to happen one after another. Default text. The government official was uneasy and couldn't help but have a fantasy. Could it be that his wife was not dead? With doubts, he came to the intensive care unit of the hospital to visit the boy who had been successfully rescued. The boy's name was Xiaoji, and he was a frequent visitor to this hospital. Due to his health. There was a strange disease that often struck him suddenly. He would be on the verge of life and death. Fortunately, he was rescued every time. Every time he woke up, he would say something strange. The Chinese came to the ward for emergency treatment and saw Xiaoji buried in the painting. The painting was a distorted cross-like pattern. At the beginning, Hai joked with him. "Are you drawing the cross jelly from the supermarket?" The lady laughed. The nurse beside him also joked that he had been talking non-stop since he woke up. This pattern not only made him want to eat jelly, but also made him feel familiar with the conversation that followed. The smile shop payment by a group of my best bridge wanted to ask the reporter more questions about Xiaoji. But the nurse next to him became nervous because there was a rule that anyone who didn't like Xiaoji was related to Xiaoji. It turns out that there was a nun who had such a negative experience before. After that, she came to the hospital for an interview. After the video of her body was exposed by the media, it caused a panic in the society and the hospital began to have troubles. The story knew that Joe had just lost his wife and probably wanted to ask some questions about his wife through the nurse. So, the smart and kind nurse immediately turned a blind eye and said that she was going to have a cup of coffee. Please watch the Lantern Festival story first. As soon as she crossed the bridge, she got straight to the point and said, "Weren't you unconscious yesterday? How could you see me when you were unconscious?" Xiaoji smiled and said, "I didn't see it with my eyes, but from above." Joe was a little skeptical. The nurse immediately said, "Guess what I saw? I saw that your head is bald." In an instant, he was quietly shocked by the negative words. There was indeed a protrusion on the top of his head. Kong quickly began to inquire about his wife's condition, then continued, "I love you my whole life. I know him as a kind angel. Yesterday, while he was unconscious, I saw him. He seemed to be in a rainbow, surrounded by water. He also told me to tell her husband something." Qiao hurriedly sat down and unconsciously leaned closer to the lady. He was eager to know what his wife wanted to say to her. Joe Q briefly introduced that Ji suddenly began to lose control again. Soon his father rushed in and asked what happened. After finding out the situation, his father laughed and said to Qiao, "Dear life, you have been fooled by this naughty little guy again. Did he play QQ games with you again?" Then he pointed to the mirror in the corner of the ceiling. Qiao was a little amused and helpless. The young lady insisted with a serious face that everything she said was true. Finally, she left the stingy ward with doubts. But when she walked to the ward at the end of the corridor, she turned around and saw a scene that immediately shocked her again. In the evening, several colleagues from the hospital came to find Qiao for a drink and persuaded him to get over his grief as soon as possible. After a few drinks, he couldn't help but tell them about the strange things that had happened recently. One of the friends didn't believe it, but became more worried. Qiao even thought that he missed his wife too much. This led to serious hallucinations, so they all advised him to put down his work and take a vacation to relax. Facing his friends' worries, Qiao didn't care about the strange things that happened one after another. He thought it was his wife's call, or maybe his son was not dead after all. After the party, he couldn't sleep and drove to the hospital to visit another boy who drew the cross. What he didn't expect was that this boy also said the same strange words. He believed that these were the calls from the boy when his wife touched the screen. Where was the place with the oil rainbow? What did his wife want to tell him? Everything became more and more confusing. Looking at the photos of his wife when she was alive, his heart was filled with sadness. Just then, Qiao showed the contrast. In the middle of the night, he fell asleep by catching a fish tank, and suddenly there was a thunder outside. Joe, awakened, suddenly heard a clean thing in the house. He went to check and found that the parrot in the house was running around in the living room. It knocked over the flower pot on the table and finally fell directly to the ground. He hurriedly went to check on his mother and found that she was fine. He breathed a sigh of relief, but when he looked up, there was no one. His wife was standing outside the window staring at him. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared again. Kiao rushed out and drove out. On the way, he hurriedly called the neighbor to ask him to help take care of the frightened parrot at home.